Welcome back to the deep dive. Grab your coffee or your popcorn or maybe something a little stronger today because we are walking straight into a minefield.
That's putting it lightly.
We are looking at a story that is equal parts Hollywood legend, cautionary tale, and conspiracy thriller. We're talking about a man who was, at one point, the absolute undisputed king.
I mean, truly undisputed. We're talking Oscar winner, box office titan, the kind of guy who could get anything greenlit just by, blinking in the right direction.
And then he became perhaps the biggest pariah in the history of modern celebrity. Gone.
It is a trajectory, that is. It's almost Shakespearean in its scope, or maybe, biblical, considering the subject matter of his most famous film.
Right.
It's a rise and fall that really has no parallel in modern media. It's that extreme.
Exactly. We are talking, of course, about Mel Gibson. But before you roll your eyes or tune out, think you know this whole story. Just hold on. We aren't just doing a biography here.
No, not at all.
We are looking at a very specific, very controversial premise based on this deep video essay we found called Mel Gibson Tried to Warn. And it pulls together interviews, court records, industry analysis, all to ask a really uncomfortable question.
And that question is the whole reason we're doing this. Did Mel Gibson actually try to warn us about the dark, predatory underbelly of Hollywood years, even decades, before movements like Me Too?
Oh.
Or did he simply self-destruct because of his own, very public, very ugly personal demons? And are we now just retrofitting a heroic narrative onto what was really just a tragedy?
It is the ultimate chicken or the egg scenario, but with way, way higher stakes. So the mission for this deep dive is tricky. We are not here to defend his controversies, and trust me, we're going to get into the realia.
The tapes, the rants, the DUI, all of it.
All of it. But we aren't here to blindly condemn him either. Our goal is to use Gibson's rise, his massive fall, and his very strange survival as a lens to understand Hollywood.
Right. We want to look at the machinery, because the source material argues that Hollywood doesn't actually care about morality in the way you or I might. It cares about something else. It cares about the social contract.
And Gibson.
He didn't just break that contract. He took a match to it.
So here is our roadmap for today. We're going to start with his origin story, because it turns out he was an outsider from day one, which is really key to this whole thing. Then we're going to look at the specific warnings the source claims he dropped back in the night, including a story about Christopher Walken. That is honestly one of the creepiest things I've heard in a long time.
Oh, that story is bizarre.
Yeah.
Then we have to talk about the nuclear explosion that was The Passion of the Christ.
Yes.
And, more importantly, why that movie specifically made him a target for the industry establishment. It wasn't just about religion.
Then, of course, we hit the downfall. The DUI, the tapes, the blacklist, the whole implosion.
And finally, and I think this is the most interesting part, we're going to look at the hypocrisy of it. Who does Hollywood forgive? Who do they destroy? And after everything, why is Mel Gibson still standing?
It's a lot to unpack.
It is. But to understand the ending, you really have to understand the beginning. And with Gibson, the beginning is unlike almost anyone else in his bracket of fame.
Yeah, let's start there. Section 1, the accidental superstar. I think when we look at stars from that era, your Tom Cruises or George Clooney's, whoever, we assume there was this polished, desperate climb to the top.
Oh, absolutely. Waiting tables, networking at parties, begging agents for a one-line part.
Right, what our source calls the submission phase.
The submission phase, yes. I love that term. It sounds so ominous.
It does. What does that actually mean in a practical sense? Because everyone struggles, right? Even Brad Pitt had to wear a chicken suit for El Polo Loco. That sounds like submission to me.
Sure, everyone struggles, but not everyone submits. The submission phase is a concept you see in a lot of high-power industry, but it's just so visible in Hollywood. It's this unspoken contract. It usually lasts about a decade.
A decade?
At least. You're fetching coffee for a producer you can't stand. You're laughing at jokes from a studio head that aren't funny. You're taking roles you hate because your agent tells you it's a good career move.
So you're learning to play the game.
You're being trained to be a subordinate. You are learning, fundamentally, that your survival depends on someone else's permission. It's institutionalized hazing.
It's hazing. That's a great way to put it.
It breaks you down so they can build you up as their product. The system needs you to know that they made you, so they always have the power to destroy you. But Gibson,
he skipped it.
He completely, totally bypassed higher ecos.
How is that even possible? I mean, did he just get incredibly lucky?
Well, luck definitely played a part, but it was mostly geography and circumstance. He wasn't a Nepo baby. His parents weren't in the business. He wasn't even Hollywood adjacent. His background is completely blue collar.
Right. The source material mentions his family moved from New York to Australia when he was 12. But the reason for the move is just wild.
It is. It sets the stage for his whole worldview. His father, Hutton Gibson, was a brakeman for the New York Central Railroad.
A tough job.
Dangerous, hard work. In the late 60s, he slips on some oil, hurts his back pretty badly, and he sues the company. And he wins a settlement, about $145,000.
Which in 1968, I mean, that's a fortune. That is absolute start a new life money.
Exactly. And Hutton Gibson is a very specific type of guy. He's a traditionalist Catholic, very, very suspicious of the changing American culture in the 60s. And he's terrified that his son, and Mel is one of 11 kids, by the way,
11, wow,
are going to get drafted into the Vietnam War. So he takes the money, packs up the entire massive family, and moves them to the absolute bottom of the world, Australia.
So Mel isn't just an outsider to Hollywood. He's an outsider to America at this point. He's growing up in a house that views authority with deep suspicion, thousands of miles away from the glitz and glamour.
Precise. And this is so key to his psychology. He didn't grow up worshiping movie stars on the screen. He grew up in a working class environment where you worked with your hands. He didn't even want to be an actor, really.
I read that his sister signed him up for drama school.
She filled out his application for Australia's National Institute of Dramatic Art without telling him. Fell into it. He had no grand ambition.
Which brings us to the story of how he got his breakout role in Mad Max. This is the stuff of legend. I feel like this story gets told a lot, but the details in our source material really paint a picture.
It really does. It frames his entire career.
So it's the late 70s. Gibson is still in drama school in Australia. The night before the audition for this film called Mad Max, he gets into a massive bar fight.
And not like a shoving match, a real brawl.
A real ugly brawl. The source says his face was, and I'm quoting here, like a busted grapefruit.
Not exactly the look you're going for when you're trying to become a leading man.
Right. He's bruised, swollen, completely messed up. He actually only went to the audition to drop off a friend, another actor named. He wasn't planning to read for a part. He was just the driver. But he's sitting there in the waiting room, this guy who looks like he just went 12 rounds with a semi-truck, and the casting director.
And you have to remember what Mad Max was. This wasn't a polished studio film. It was a gritty, low-budget, guerrilla-style movie about the complete collapse of civilization.
They needed someone who looked like they'd been through it.
The director, George Miller, walks past him. Miller later said he was looking for freaks. He sees Gibson battered, bruised, clearly hungover, and he thinks to himself, that is what the apocalypse looks like.
So they basically hired him because he looked like a total disaster.
They took his picture for their freaks board and told him to come back in 2 weeks when the swelling went down. Maybe he could play a background thug. When he came back, they realized, oh, wait, under all those bruises, this is a handsome guy who can actually act. But that initial impression, the raw, damaged toughness, that's what got him the part.
And that movie, Mad Max, becomes a global phenomenon. I mean, it was the most profitable film ever made based on return on investment for decades. Then Lethal Weapon happens, and boom, he is the biggest star on the...
And here's the crucial analysis from our source, the point that everything else hinges on, this rapid outsider ascent matter. By the time Mel Gibson arrived in a Hollywood prop, the physical town of Los Angeles, he was already a made man.
He didn't need them.
He was already rich. He was already famous. He never had to fetch coffee for a producer. He never had to laugh at a studio head's bad jokes to get a part. He never had to kiss the ring.
So he missed the hazing.
He missed the hazing. Most people, by the time they reach the A-list, have spent a decade compromising themselves piece by piece to get there. They've learned the social contract, which is essentially, you give us your obedience, we give you fame.
And Gibson arrived without owing anyone anything.
Which makes him incredibly dangerous to a system built on leverage, right?
Right. You can't control someone who doesn't need you.
Precisely. He's an outsider with insider power, and that allowed him to see the town with a clarity that the people who grew up in it just didn't have. He saw it as a strange foreign ecosystem.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 2, the whispers and warning. Because according to this video essay, once he was inside the wall, he started saying things that, in retrospect, seem like giant red flashing lights.
He wasn't playing the game. He was observing it. And he clearly didn't like what he saw. The first big example the source points to is the 1996 Oscars.
This is the peak of the mountain, Braveheart.
Peak of the mountain.
Oh man, Braveheart. It sweeps everything. Best picture, best director for him. Gibson is the king of the world. He's up there in the tuxedo, holding the gold statue, and he gets up on stage to accept the award, and what does he say?
He calls himself a fiscal imbecile.
A fiscal imbecile. On Oscar night, the biggest night in Hollywood.
Now, at the time, the whole room laughed. It played his charming, self-deprecation. Oh, look at this kooky artist. He's bad with money. How quaint.
Right.
But the source argues there was a real edge to it. Think about who was in that room.
The richest, most fiercely capitalist people in the entire entertainment industry.
Right. It's a room that worships financial success above all else. And Gibson stands there and basically says, I don't understand your guide. I'm an idiot when it comes to money. It's a subtle but very clear rejection of their core values. He's signaling, I made you all rich, but I don't respect your game.
I'm not one of you.
Exactly. But if that was a subtle jab, the 1998 Playboy interview, that was a haymaker.
This is the one that really blew my mind, reading through the source, because it's just buried in this standard PR interview for a movie. And he starts talking about the producers in town, and he mentions one specific, unnamed producer.
He describes this producer's philosophy on women in film. The quote is, "It's just chilling." Gibson says this producer believes women on film, either naked or dead, both is better.
Naked or dead, both is better. That makes your skin crawl. It's so predatory and dismissive.
It's pure objectification. And Gibson follows that up by saying he had all these paranoid suspicions about the town, but he kept telling himself, no, that's insane. I'm just imagining it. But then he says, you find out later on the track that you are exactly on track.
The source connects this directly to Harvey Weinstein, doesn't it?
It strongly implies it. I mean, the timeline fits perfectly. Weinstein was at the absolute height of his power and his depravity in the late 90s. And that philosophy, treating women as disposable objects for visual consumption or violence, it aligns with everything we learned 2 decades later.
And Gibson was saying this in 1998.
But because he didn't name, and because he was Mad Mel, the lovable rogue, everyone just kind of glossed over it.
They just treated it as Mel being Mel. A bit crazy, a bit intense. But looking back,
he was describing a system that was fundamentally broken and predatory, and that sense of paranoia of being an outsider surrounded by something sinister, that brings us to the Christopher Walken.
Okay, this story. I need you to set the scene here, because when I read the transcript of the source video, I actually got, it is so weird. It feels like something out of a horror movie.
It's completely surreal. So Gibson is telling his story to an interviewer about meeting the actor Christopher Walken on a rooftop in New York City. Now, keep in mind, he's already feeling paranoid about the end. He describes feeling like a stranger wandering into a saloon in an old Western where the piano stops and everyone goes quiet.
The classic, you're not from around here vibe.
Right. So he's on this rooftop at some industry party surrounded by all these, and he sees Walken across the room. And he describes Walken not walking, but gliding or floating sideways through the crowd.
Like a vampire.
He explicitly says, like a vampire in an old movie. He says Walken was wearing all black, moving effortlessly, almost defying gravity, just sort of sliding between people.
That's unsettling.
He gets weirder. Gibson says he went up to talk to him, but his assistant, Gibson's own assistant, had to physically leave the immediate area. She couldn't be near them.
Why? What happened?
Gibson says because the air turned cold.
That is so specific. The air turned cold.
It's anecdotal, of course.
Right.
Gibson is a storyteller. He might be dramatizing it. But the expert insight here isn't about whether Christopher Walken is literally a vampire.
Right, I hope not.
It's about how Gibson perceived the Hollywood elite. He saw them as something otherworldly, something cold, something predatory that glides through the crowd while everyone else around them freezes up.
It reframes his whole attitude, doesn't it? If he genuinely felt he was surrounded by vampires, metaphorical or otherwise, it explains the paranoia. It explains the hostility.
It suggests he never felt safe, even when he was on top of the world. He felt he was in a weird town where the normal rules of humanity didn't apply. And if you feel that way long enough, eventually you stop trying to fit in.
You stop trying to play by their rules.
You start trying to blow the whole place up.
Which is the perfect segue to Section 3, the Declaration of Independence, or as we all know it, the Passion of the Christ.
This is the moment where Gibson stops just whispering warnings from the inside and starts actively fighting the system from the outside.
It's 2002. Gibson decides he wants to make a movie about the last 12 hours' life, the torture and the death. But not just any movie. He wants to do it entirely in Aramaic and Latin.
Dead languages.
And originally, his plan was to have no subtitles. He just wanted the audience to feel the raw power of the image.
From a business perspective, this is commercial suicide. You are taking the biggest movie star in the world, putting him behind the camera, and making a movie that sounds like a history lecture and looks like a stomach-churning horror.
So naturally, he takes it to the studios. He goes to Fox, Universal, Warner Bros., Disney. He goes to 7 major studios in total.
And every single one of them passed. A hard pass.
Why? I mean, this is Mel Gibson. He's a money print. Braveheart, Lethal Weapon, The Patriot, What Women Want. Why on earth say no?
2 main reasons. First, the commercial viability, which we just talked about, is subtitled Religious Gore Fest, just screamed box office bomb. But secondly, and much more importantly, it was politically radioactive.
This is where the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, comes in.
Right. The ADL got their hands on an early version of the script, and they immediately rang every alarm bell they could. They warned that the film was based on old, anti-Semitic passion plays that historically blamed the Jewish people for the death of Jesus. They argued it would fuel hate.
And this is where we have to look at Gibson's own bag. Because this wasn't coming out of nowhere, we have to talk about his father again.
No, you can't ignore it. It's central to the story. His father, Hutton Gibson, is a known Holocaust denier and a Sedevacantist Catholic, a radical offshoot group that rejects the modern Vatican. When Mel was pressed on this during the production, he did distance himself.
Yeah, what did he say?
He said, "My dad taught me my faith. The man never lied."
That is a heavy, heavy statement. He's essentially standing by his father's worldview, or at least refusing to condemn it, and the media just tore him apart for it. Frank Rich at the New York Times went after the project hard, and Gibson's response.
It was completely unhinged. This is where that lovable rogue mask just shattered. He told the New Yorker, referring to Frank Rich, "I want to kill him. I want his intestines on a stick. I want to kill his dog."
Intestines on a stick, that is a visual.
It's the sound of a man who feels cornered and is lashing out with the most extreme violence he can imagine. The pressure on him was immense. The studios had locked him out. The media was calling him an anti-Semite. South Park did that famous episode, The Passion of the Jew.
God, I remember that episode. They depicted him as a masochistic lunatic who smears feces on walls. It was brutal.
So the narrative was set. Mel Gibson has lost his mind, and this movie is going to be his career suicide. He had no other choice but to self-finance the entire thing.
He put up $45 million of his own money.
He remortgaged his properties, his houses, everything. If this film failed, he wasn't just out of a job, he was financially ruined, personally.
The stakes could not possibly be higher, and yet the result was staggering.
The film opens on Ash Wednesday 2004, and it grosses $612 million worldwide.
$612 million.
And because he financed it himself, Gibson personally walked away with an estimated $400 to $475 million.
That's an insane amount of money for one person on one project.
It's unheard of, and this is the key point. He beat the system. He went around the studios, proved them wrong, and won bigger than anyone had ever won before. The source quotes Gibson as saying the industry's reaction was essentially, "We can't let that guy do that again."
It wasn't about the content of the movie anymore, was it? It was about the precedent he set.
Exactly. He showed the other A-listers that the gatekeepers weren't necessary. If Tom Cruise or Will Smith realized they could do this, self-finance, market directly to their fans, and keep almost all of the profit, the entire studio system collapses overnight.
The studios exist to be the bank. And Mel proved the bank was unnecessary.
He beat the house. And in a town built on control, that is an unforgivable sin.
Yeah.
They put a massive target on his back. But, and this is a huge, huge but, you cannot blame the system for what happened next.
No, you really can't.
Because if the passion was him beating the system, the next few years were him handing the system all the ammunition they needed to destroy him.
Which brings us to Section 4, the self.
This is where the tragedy really takes over. It's 2006, the Malibu DUI.
Right. He gets pulled over, speeding on the Pacific Coast Highway. He's drunk, and then he starts talking.
And he just can't stop.
The arresting officer was a woman, I believe?
Yeah, Deputy Me. And he calls her Sugar Tit. And then he launches into the rant that was heard around the world. He asks the deputy if he's Jewish, and then claims Jews are responsible for all the wars in the world.
The smoking gun, it was everywhere. It was on TMZ before TMZ was even a household name. The audio, the police report, everything leaked.
It confirmed everything his critics had been saying during the Passion controversy. They could all point and say, "See, we told you." It wasn't just artistic choices in a movie. The guy is a vile anti-Semite.
Gibson tried to apologize. He went on TV. He admitted to alcoholism, called it a malady of the soul. He said, "I said things I don't believe because I was drunk."
But the industry wasn't buying. Not this time. Ari Emanuel, who was one of those powerful agents in Hollywood, he's the guy, the character Ari Gold in Entourage is based. He writes this public open letter.
What did it say?
In a nutshell, Hollywood should not do business with Mel Gibson. His argument was simple and devastating. Being drunk doesn't put thoughts in your head. It just lets the thoughts that are already there out.
In vino veritas. In wine, there's truth.
Exactly. So the walls start closing in. But he wasn't fully done yet. He was still Mel Gibson. He could maybe have rehabilitated after a few quiet years. But then 2010 happened.
The tapes.
The tapes. Leaked phone calls between Gibson and his then partner, Oksana Grigorieva, during their custody battle.
These were... they were just hard to listen to. We've all heard bad arguments, but this was something else entirely. This was pure toxicity.
It was abuse.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. It's on tape.
Yeah.
Uses the N-word. He tells her, and this is a direct quote from the source, "If you get assaulted by a pack of racist slur, it'll be your fault."
Blaming the victim in the most horrific, racist way imaginable. It's just stomach-churning.
He threatens to burn the house down.
Yeah.
And then there's the most chilling line. He tells her, "I'll put you in a rose garden."
Which is a threat, right? A threat to kill her and bury her.
That's the clear implication. He follows it up with, "You understand that, because I'm capable of it."
It was monstrous. There's really no other word for it.
No. And this is where the Gibson tried to warn you theory hits a brick wall for a lot of people. Because even if he was right about Hollywood being a predatory place, on these tapes, he was being the predator. He was abusive, racist, and threatening.
It completely destroyed him. He was fully exiled. He got a domestic violence restraining order. His agent dropped him. No movies. For nearly a decade, Mel Gibson was persona non grata.
And rightfully so, most people would say. But here is where the source material pivots to its most controversial point, the hypocrisy angle. Because if you look closely at how the blacklist actually worked, it reveals something fascinating and, frankly, pretty ugly about Hollywood.
This is section 5, the hypocrisy of the black. And this part really surprised me. It starts with a game of corporate musical chairs played by the age. Let's circle back to Ari Emanuel. He's the guy who wrote the big open letter calling for Gibson to be exiled. But the source material suggests this was, well, tactical.
Tactical is a polite word for it. The source argues it was corporate warfare disguised as a moral crusade. To understand this, you have to understand the agency wars of the mid-2000s.
Okay, set the stage for me.
Okay. So Ari Emanuel runs Endeavor, which would later become the behemoth WME. His biggest rival at the time was another agency, ICM. And back then, Mel Gibson was ICM's crown jewel.
He was their biggest client.
By a mile. He was the biggest commission check in the building. So when Gibson gets the DUI and goes on that anti-Semitic rant,
Ari sees an opening.
Ari sees a massive opening. He writes this high-minded letter on the Huffington Post saying, "We cannot allow this hate speech in our community. We must shun him." The public sees a powerful man taking a brave moral stand against anti-Semitism.
But the industry sees something else entirely.
The industry sees Ari Emanuel trying to decapitate his rival. If he can successfully campaign to get Gibson kicked out of the business, ICM loses their biggest revenue stream. It weakens them for a potential merger or takeover down the line. And it worked. Gibson was dropped. ICM took a massive financial hit.
Okay, but that's just ruthless. I can see that. Where does the hypocrisy?
The hypocrisy comes in a few years later. The dust settles. Gibson starts to slowly work his way back. And eventually, Gibson needs a new, powerful agent. He leaves ICM, and guess where he lands? He signs with WME, Ari Emanuel's agency.
The guy who wrote the letter saying, "We must shun him."
The very same. And did Ari Emanuel resign in protest? Did he refuse to cash the fat commission checks from Gibson's comeback movies? No. The agency happily took him on. The moral line in the sand completely vanished the second the money was flowing into Ari's pocket instead of his competitors.
That is just incredibly cynical.
It teaches you the most important rule of Hollywood, according to the source. A crime is only a crime if it hurts the bottom line. If it helps the bottom line, it's just a personal eccentricity.
And the source goes even further. It argues that Hollywood doesn't ban people for being bad. It bans them for being loud and unspinnable.
This is the what about section of the analysis, and the list of names the source provides is really, really depressing.
It is. The central argument, if Mel Gibson was banned for being a monster, why wasn't Harvey Weinstein banned in the 90s?
Everybody knew. I mean, Gibson alluded to it in that Playboy interview. Courtney Love made a joke about it on her red carpet in 2005. She looked into the camera and said, "If Harvey Weinstein invites you to a private party at the Four Seasons, don't go."
And what happened to her?
For saying that, she was blacklisted by CAA, Weinstein's agent. Harvey kept working, winning Oscars until 2017.
Because he was powerful, and his sins, while horrific, were committed in private hotel rooms, not on leaked audio tape.
Exactly. Or look at Roman Polanski. This isn't an allegation. He pleaded guilty to unlawful sex with a minor, a 13-year-old girl, and then fled the country to avoid going to prison. He is a literal fugitive from U.S. justice.
And in 2003, right around the time Gibson is getting all this heat for The Passion, Polanski wins the Oscar for Best Director for The Pianist.
Dan gets a standing ovation. A room full of Hollywood elites stood up and cheered for a man who cannot legally enter the country because he sexually abused a child.
That image, the standing ovation for Polanski versus public flogging, that is the core of the hypocrisy argument.
It is. Then there's Victor Salva. He directed the horror movie Jeepers Creepers. He was convicted of abusing a 12-year-old boy, one of the child actors in one of his earlier films. He actually served time in prison. And after he got out,
Hollywood hired him again.
Immediately. Disney hired him to direct a children's movie called Powder.
Wait, Disney hired a convicted child abuser to direct a movie aimed at kids?
Yes, because he was cheap and he was talented, and his crime wasn't a PR firestorm at that. The source's point is devastatingly clear. Mel Gibson said some truly vile, hateful things, but he didn't physically abuse children. Yet Salva and Polanski were embraced by the artistic community, while Gibson was treated as a leper.
So why? What is the distinction there?
The source argues it's all about the political expense, or the PR expense. Gibson scandals were on audio tapes. They were rants to police officers. They were viral before viral was really a thing. You couldn't spin them. You couldn't ignore them. Polanski and Salva. You could do the whole separate the art from the artist thing because their crimes were in the past or happened behind closed doors.
Gibson was screaming the N-word on a tape that was playing on every blog in the world.
That is bad for the brand. That is bad for business.
So it was never a moral judgment. It was a business decision. Mel is too hot to handle.
Precisely. It's a cold calculation. How much money will this person make us? Minus how much headache will they cause us? For a decade, Gibson's result was negative, so he was out.
Until he wasn't. Because he came back. Which brings us to Section 6, the redemption arc and the culture war.
The exile lasted about 10 years, and the return started, fittingly, with another bloody war movie, Hacksaw Ridge in 2016.
And once again, he had to use independent financing, right?
He wasn't getting huge studio checks yet, but the movie was just undeniable. It was a critical and commercial success. He got 6 Oscar nominations, including Best Director for him. And then we see the public forgiveness ritual begin.
And who leads that ritual? Iron Man himself, Robert Downey Jr.?
Yes. Now, you have to remember, RDJ had his own massive fall from grace drugs, prison. He was completely uninsurable. And Gibson had actually helped RDJ when nobody else in town would hire him. He personally paid RDJ's insurance bond on a movie when the studios refused.
So Downey was paying back a debt?
He was. He gets on stage at an award show and basically asks the industry to forgive his friend.
He has that great line. He says, "Unless you are completely without sin, you picked the wrong tree."
Which is such a beautiful line, but it's also a stinging indictment of everyone in that room. He's basically saying, I know what you people have done in private, so get off your high horses.
Jodie Foster defended him, too. Whoopi Goldberg went on The View and defended him, saying, I know he's not a racist.
The industry started to thaw. He was allowed back into the club. But then 2023 happened, and things got really weird.
Sound of Freedom.
This is where Mel Gibson moves from being a controversial actor to a symbol in the culture war.
So Gibson was an executive producer on Sound of Freedom, which is a film about child trafficking.
A film that became this massive, unexpected sleeper hit, largely driven by conservative and religious audience. And immediately, this narrative formed that Hollywood had tried to kill this movie.
The sabotage narrative.
Exactly. The film was originally made at 20th Century Fox. Disney bought Fox. And during the merger, Disney shelved the film. The filmmakers had to literally buy the rights back from Disney to release it. So fans claimed Disney was trying to suppress the truth about child trafficking.
And in the middle of all this, all these quotes started circulating online. I saw them everywhere. Quotes attributed to Mel Gibson saying things like, the elites drink children's blood, and talking about satanic rituals and adrenochrome.
Right. It painted Gibson as this ultimate whistleblower, the guy who had seen the devil face-to-face in Hollywood and was now trying to tell the world the horrible truth.
But the source material does a very important fact check here. And we need to be crystal clear about this because this misinformation is still floating around.
Yes. The source states unequivocally, and they show their work, those quotes are fake.
Completely fake.
Completely. They trace them back to a notorious misinformation site called Your Newswire, which is rebranded a few times. Gibson never said any of that. He never talked about drinking blood. He never mentioned adrenochrome.
So he's being used as a pawn in the culture war.
He's being turned into a meme, a symbol.
Yeah.
To one side of the internet, he's a martyred truth teller fighting the global pedophile elites. To the other side, he's the ultimate symbol of hate speech and mad, but the real Mel Gibson. He's probably somewhere in the middle, just trying to make movies and stay sober.
It's fascinating how the public just projects whatever they want on. The QAnon crowd needs him to be their hero. The progressive crowd needs him to be the ultimate villain.
And meanwhile, he just helped produce a movie about trafficking because, like most people, he thinks trafficking is bad. The reality is often much more boring than the conspiracy.
But the conspiracy sticks because of everything we talked about earlier. The warnings from the 90s, the naked or dead comment, the vampire stories. It's like people take the real warnings he gave and then they remix them in crazy, unbelievable.
That's the key. The fake quotes go viral because they feel true based on the foundation of what we know about his history. He did warn us about Weinstein-type producers. He did say the town felt cold and predatory. So it's not a huge leap for people to believe he said the crazy.
So after all of this, where does that leave us? We've covered the rise, the warnings, the crash, the hypocrisy, and the fake news. How do we wrap our heads around?
I think we have to go back to that one word he used to describe Hollywood.
The outro. At a press conference, some reporter described Hollywood in just one kind of laugh.
Survival.
Survival.
Not art, not fame, not dreams. Survival, like you're in a jungle or a war zone.
And if you look at his now, the deep lines, the crazy beard, he looks like a survivor. He looks like Mad Max for real.
The source concludes that Gibson is not a hero. His behavior on those tapes was, to use his own word, despicable. You can't wash that away. But his story reveals what Hannah Arendt called the banality of evil in Hollywood.
Explain that phrase in this context. What does that mean?
It means the real evil in the system isn't necessarily satanic rituals in a basement. It's much more boring and bureaucratic. It's agents looking the other way when a client abuses someone because the commission check is good. It's studios protecting a predator like Weinstein for decades because he wins some Oscars and makes some money. It's the silence.
The silence of the saloon when the stranger walks in.
Exactly. The system protected its monsters through a conspiracy of silence. And it only punished Gibson when he broke that silence. First, by proving he could succeed independently with the passion, and then by being so publicly, messily, and unprofitably loud with his personal life.
So the lesson isn't Mel Gibson was right about it. The lesson is Hollywood will tolerate almost anything except losing money and creating a PR nightmare you can't control.
That's the cynical but likely accurate takeaway. It's not a battle between good and evil.
Yeah.
The battle between profit and liability.
And for a long time, Mel Gibson was a liability until he became profitable again.
And round it goes.
It really makes you wonder, though, about those warnings he gave back in the 90s. He told us about the producers who view women as meat. He told us about the cold, vampiric nature of the social interactions in that town.
He told us it was a game of survival.
So here is the final provocative thought for you listening. If Mel Gibson's warnings about the Harvey Weinsteins of the world were true warnings that were ignored by almost everyone for 20 years, what is happening right now, today in Hollywood, that we are all ignoring?
Who are the people currently being protected right now because they are still considered too big to fail?
And in 20 years, when the next massive scandal inevitably breaks, will we look back at some crazy interview from today and realize they tried to warn us?
That is the question that should keep people up.
On that cheerful note, that's our deep dive on Mel Gibson. It's a messy, complicated story for a messy, complicated.
Indeed.
Thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next one.
Stay curious.